Marianne Rocaforte Gardner, friend and colleague of Lois Roma-Deeley, and we're very excited about today's reading. I'll be serving as moderator today, and also moderating with technology is Olivia Loftus. And we are very pleased to have the owner and publisher of Kelsay Books, Karen Kelsay, in from England at the moment, and all of you. So we're very excited. As you probably know, Like Water in the Palm of My Hand is Lois's 5th collection of poetry, just released from Kelsay Books. And we're excited to have so many supporters of the arts and poetry with us today. A few housekeeping requests. As Olivia mentioned, please be sure that your mute button is on. During the reading, if and when you have remarks, please enter them in chat by pressing the chat button. That should appear on the bottom of your screen, and then we will be addressing your comments and questions after the reading during our informal Q&A. And as you can see, also the event is being recorded, and it will be available for viewing on YouTube. And for that link, go to Kelsay's homepage, which, Olivia, are you going to post some of the links today for?
Yes, I just posted the link to Like Water in the Palm of My Hand in the chat.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, and on that same website then is the book, the publishing company overall. And so about Lois. Lois's most recent poetry collection is, as I mentioned, Like Water in the Palm of My Hand. Her previous books include the short List of Certainties, which was the winner of the Jacopone da Todi Book Prize in 2017, as well as High Notes, northSight, and Rules of Hunger. And Lois's poems have also been published in numerous anthologies and journals, nationally and internationally. She was named U.S. Professor of the Year, Community College, by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and CASE, and that was 2012 to 13. And she is Poet Laureate of Scottsdale, Arizona. And as Lois's friend and colleague for many years, I've had the honor of working with her on a variety of creativity-based projects, both in higher education settings and in the broader community. Not only is she widely respected for her writing, but she is also, as you know, a well-loved teacher, mentor, artistic collaborator, and editor. And now just a few words about the collection, Like Water in the Palm of My Hand. The book, as I mentioned, can be purchased online, or maybe I didn't mention it. It can be purchased online at Kelsay Books, and we encourage you to support independent publishers. So that website will be available and is right there in the chat. And I'd like to read for you just a few selections from advanced reviews of the book. The first one is by Daniel Tobin, who's the author of 8 poetry collections, including Blood Labors, which was named to the New York Times 2018 Best Book of the Year list. And Daniel says, the poems of Lois Roma-Deeley's latest book are like lucid dreams, at once as vivid, joyous, and as painful as life itself. And they are more. In their faithful adherence to the truth of the encountered world, Roma-Deeley's poems seek to pitch imagination beyond itself to something more like divination. These are poems that show us, quote, how hard it is to be a human being, end quote, but which also, quote, celebrate the moment of possibility. And the next review excerpt is by Angela Alaimo O'Donnell, the author of Andalusian Hours and Love in the Time of Coronavirus. And she writes, Roma-Deeley takes the reader to challenging spaces and places where we discover we're, quote, made for more and yet just for this brokenness, this suffering, this sad and saving beauty. And finally, from Margaret Rauska, former Poet Laureate of Wisconsin and author of Holding Myself Together, New and Selected Poems, Roma-Deeley's poems give palpable form to intangible powers that may be even more potent for their being ephemeral. She aims high and succeeds. And so now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Lois Roma-Deeley.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank you all for coming to my first Zoom poetry reading. I'd like to thank Kelsay Books for doing such an outstanding job with my book, for publishing me and for hosting this Zoom reading, and to thank you all for your support. I know I've got people on the East Coast, in the middle of the country, and on the West Coast, so I so appreciate everyone coming and making time today, not only to support me, but also for honoring the place of poetry in our culture. The great poet Muriel Rukeyser once said, "Breathe in experience, breathe out poetry." The poems in Like Water in the Palm of My Hand are rooted in my experience. At times they are intimately personal, and at other times, I hope, embracingly universal. In this book, different voices merge and separate and come back again, all the while spiraling through time. There are only glimpses of the eternal. These poems are really about relationships, of the familiar and the different, of dreaming and waking, of memory and imagination, of the ordinary and the transcendent, of the particular and the infinite, of how we as human beings are singular and yet part of the whole. As Rumi once said, "Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are 100 ways to kneel and kiss the ground." So with that, I'll read you the first poem that opens the book. Particulars. One kangaroo. One sad story. One street, one way, up or down, doesn't matter where you go, you always wind up with an uncommon note, silver or blue. Like the harmony of speech and silence, or the solitary heart refusing to open. But what about that kangaroo? You really want to know, don't you? How things get pocketed into other things, the one and only, the specific, the different. This next poem came out of an article I read in the New York Times about this Egyptian woman who disguised herself as a man for 43 years. And she said she'd rather serve dirt to her child than be married again. And so that quote kind of conjured up a lot of images for me, and what kind of life she must have lived to say such a thing. And at once sad, but also I think in many ways very, very heroic. 43 years, and I guess no one figured it out, so I don't know about that. So this is called Ghost Mother. Egyptian woman disguised herself as a man for 43 years, the New York Times. If you had asked me, I would have told you why I dressed in these pants and tunic, tied a green scarf around my close cropped hair, smoked cigarettes, spoke rough and low. Why I harvested crops, hauled cement, lifted bricks, cleaned the dust and dirt off 1,000 shoes, with nothing more to think about but how the day would end. My daughter and I survived, and I was never beaten again. Now, walking through the maze of back alleys, I set my back against the wind. I'm a ghost mother. Memories float through time to our small house, the one with 2 good chairs, an old radio humming on the kitchen shelf, and my little girl playing on the bare floor. I am a pearl shadow, standing at the stove, smiling at pigeons simmering in the pot, who seem to smile back. I fill their stomachs with rice and herbs, and now they bob up and down on a roiling sea of cinnamon and cloves. Oh my goodness. I skipped ahead of myself here. So I grew up on Long Island, New York, and been out here in Phoenix, Arizona for a couple of decades. It's an interesting experience to come from a place that's so green and lush to the desert. This place, though, is kind of magical, mystical in its own way. This poem is called Sleepwalking Through the City. Often I find myself waking in strange places, in a neighbor's bathtub, at the pauper's cemetery, on the last car of the light rail. The doc says it comes from watching too much news. The fragile mind can't cope. Tonight, here I am again, alone and confused, standing barefoot in the heart of Phoenix at the Zen garden, row how on. It's late. There's black tar on the bottoms of my feet. I must have been walking for hours with eyes wide open, seeing nothing but this unraveling dream tucked somewhere in between Central and 3rd Ave. The night took me to the golden Buddha squatting on a slab of rose quartz stone. He winks and grins at me. Nothing is lost in the universe. Suddenly, everything I thought I ever knew is rushing at me. It's not the first time I've been taken for a fool. My throat is dry, sweat runs down my back. I decide to ignore him. Focus on how I've always loved the hidden places of this city, named for a bird which consumes itself in flames, then rising from its own ashes is reborn, just to do it all over again. As many of you know, I've had the pleasure of working with various visual artists, Beth Shader, who's here today, as well as Cherie Buck Hutchinson. This poem does come out of a very personal experience, and really, quite frankly, one I didn't really want to make public. But Cherie made this beautiful artwork, and this poem came in a response to it. Why moon jellyfish won't speak of cancer. I suppose I should start more slowly, work up to it, draw you in, tell you a smart story about a wolf limping down a country lane and how the animal is chained to a gray bearded beggar who is toothless, but properly kind. And how they're suddenly overtaken by a wind so powerful, it blows them clear across the ocean, where they are trapped forever on an island you never dreamed of, but fear might actually exist. But that won't do. It won't tell you how the words cancer and I have take on a life all their own. This tale won't take you to that elsewhere place where time creates a silky pocket and shoehorns you inside its pouch, and how you'll press fingertips to the wall of that translucent membrane which divides the just you from the just world. Perhaps if I mouth the words, we are not alone, to the trembling moon jellies glowing in the dark, floating to the surface of an eternal sea garden, their luminescent hearts would sing out to me. There is a language beyond language. Would the sting shock you? Would you believe me then? If I said I was always afraid now of beginning that kind of story. This next poem comes out of a conversation I had with my cousin, and I asked her, and I've got the wrong page number here. Oh, no, I don't. I can't see very well. I was asking her about someone, and she had this immediate response. And as she said this, it was like, oh, the poem was already written, which hardly ever happens because I'm an excruciatingly slow writer. And this poem is called Spellbound. Me. Before they were married, what did she do for a living? You. She was a pretty girl. She was the applause of hard rain, falling into the street, and soon after, the slap of new shoes on wet concrete. She was the shimmer or the shine of a dozen sequined mouths stitched onto the back of a leather jacket, the slice of orange and the leaves of mint swirling around the edges of a water glass, the flick of a cat's tongue, pink and pointed. She was the welcoming flash of blinking neon signs, the longboat leaving the harbor, sailing past the horizon line of a man's body. She wanted the hunger inside the bird's belly, the pause after evening prayers, the ground of no sorrow, reeling under a ribbon sky. So I was saying that this book really is exploring relationships. I'm sorry, my eyes are just watering with the allergies. And so I started thinking about this poem and how I would preface it. And this poem is about friendship, but it's also about how relationships in our lives, such essential relationships, kind of almost run concurrently with our other lives. Friendships, relationships that are essential to us and that run with us. And how I think with certain relationships, sometimes it's only a kind of intimacy between two people that really almost can't be explained. So this is a poem I wrote for my best friend. Outtakes from the movie of my life. for Carrie. 1. We're stuck on a raft lurching down Snake River, having come a long way just to find some peace. In this aerial shot of steep canyon walls and white water tumbling over jagged rocks, we're floating, dark specks of solitude and longing. 2. Suddenly the movie jump cuts to close-ups of us drinking from the same canteen. 3. We both know the camera doesn't love us. Our faces swell and redden under the summer sun, filling each frame with too much sorrow. Now the lens refocuses itself. 4. And I crack a few jokes. You're my best friend, and so throwing your head back, you laugh. 5. The birds flying high above our heads squawk out their warning. Now the image changes again. 6. And there I am running down cellar steps. In the dark, we hear a frantic breathing. There's a homeless man crawling through your basement window. We're afraid. We're always afraid. 7. He's coming to steal the scene, hungry for applause. The camera pans left to stacks of musty magazines, then right to piles of mildewed books, finally resting on the thief sitting right between them. A flashlight hangs from his mouth. 8. He writes on a yellow pad. The words grow iridescent in the damp air, as if it were a script. 9. Of the party where we first met. In this tracking shot, my hair is long again. My hips are swaying inside that silk dress. Some kind of blue plays through the backyard speakers. Someone is swimming in the deep end of the pool. While I'm standing on the overseated lawn, a drink in one hand, a joint in the other. You're on one knee scratching the throat of a stray cat. Strange voices surround us. In the middle of the crowd, loneliness is just another face among the rest. 10. Mine, the only one you'll recognize. 11. My high heels sink into the soft grass, staining the tips of a soft shade of green. Now you come behind me, surprise. 12. Whisper into my ear. What year is this? I can't remember. 13. Time fades in, fades out. This next poem was written in relationship to my very good friend, Beth Shader, my visual artist and my friend and colleague. She's here too. And her artwork is amazing. She and I have put together what came up with the idea of poetic dialogues where visual artists and poets come together. All my part was just kind of giving her some suggestions for the poets. Anyway, the Virgin River speaks of loneliness. So deep are narrow canyon walls cut into the heart of Zion, where the cottonwood trees and box elders stand bewildered and confused. Where does the wind come from? And why do these waters rush along? I look up. Time leaves a message on these sandstone cliffs no traveler can read. The signature poem for this book is Like Water in the Palm of My Hand. And this poem also was inspired by artwork, but it was inspired by these tapestries that are hanging in the art museum in Balboa Park. They're tapestries from the 15th century. And they're really just magnificent. We went this summer to visit them and I couldn't find them. I asked the guide and he said, they're resting. So I guess they needed a rest. Like water in the palm of my hand. It hurts to look at the medieval cathedral sitting high on a hill and then walk through the rough doors only to discover the delicate fresco inside its dome, darkened by so many centuries of candle smoke and prayers. Gray-faced angels poke their wings through dingy clouds, pointing at the heads of shipwrecked sailors bobbing in a grimy sea of loss. But why am I surprised at the vivid reflections on the mosaic stone floor, swirling around both feet, how the rosettes of muted greens, cobalt blues, wine reds could be an obvious answer to the only question my heart is afraid to ask. Courage is needed to look up again into the vaulted ceiling, which pushes and pushes skyward, while wondering how those stone arches could carry the weight of so much of my own longing. Suddenly, the tapestries hanging on the back wall billows like a friendly wave from another life, the one I could have lived. Now I began to see into the design, this scene where a terrified doe jumps into the forest of ash, while these three hounds nip at an archer's heel. And now, like water in the palm of my hand, I'm dropping through time, understanding more than I can know. But the eternal now quickly slips away, leaving me alone in the shallow winter light. And I can't explain how I came here or why this ancient weaving deeply wounds me. Perhaps it was the wind, or something like the wind, coming through an open window, which released an arrow from the archer's bow, piercing my heart like this, and just so. So when we talk about relationships, I have to talk about my elder brother, Nick, who's here from New York. So some of you have been in my classes or some of my other readings know all my stories about my older brother, but I'm going to tell you now anyway, because it's being taped and it will be out there for all posterity and he can't do anything about it. So there you go. So Nick is older than me, way older than me. And no, really not that much. He was the first one in our family to go to college. And he taught me poetry. He would sit me down at the kitchen table. And because he's really a magnificent teacher and magnificent with language, he would read to me poems and he would read to me the French symbolists in French, and then he'd translate and he'd say, can you hear that? Can you hear how that verb is mimicking the sound of the rain? Il pleut. And he would read to me The Bells, which is an Italian poem. He read to me Wordsworth, We Are Seven, which is actually not a really great Wordsworth poem, but I was 12 and I was sitting at the kitchen table and I'm crying, oh my God, Nick, the little kid, she's crying, she lost her whole family. So he taught me that. He taught me many things. He taught me how to think. He taught me how to see. He taught me how to believe. And I'm forever, ever grateful to my brother, Nick Ferrone. He's had a real rough time this past year. And this, unfortunately, this poem comes out of another rough time he had. And it's called In My Brother's Recovery Room. Years ago, you watched every Superman show, instructing me on the particulars of how the man of steel can press coal into diamonds and only green kryptonite will bring him to his knees. But when you told me your hero can split himself in half, occupy two places at once, I became the little sister of unbelief. You fooled me so many times, my brother, with Santa Claus eats little girls and the devil lives in the dark spaces underneath the bed. I never knew which of them was true. It's late now in your hospital room. You're floating between this world and the next. The doctors broke you open, cracking your rib cage, pulling away the flesh, exposing heart and lungs. Tonight it's you, Nick, with the S on your chest, a careening line of stitches, catgut and dried blood, black circles under each eye, like the dark face of the moon, forbidden places no one wants to go. And suddenly I'm remembering a day a nail went through my foot and you carried me 3 blocks home. Even superheroes get afraid, you whispered in as I sobbed into your neck. Now, between sips of water, you see angels, streaks of sapphire blue, vermilion, gold, and the one who gives you a message without words in the landscape of pure white. Now I know all of it is true. Time breaks itself in two. Love leaves in us a deep, sweet scar. You tell me, write this poem. I will, Nick. I will. Just this once and ever after, every time, always for you. He actually did tell me the devil lived underneath my bed and that Santa Claus does eat little girls. I was 2 years old, walking down this long hall to Santa Claus, and he's whispering in my ear. He's like 9 at the time. See that old man down there? He eats little girls. And by the time I got there, I couldn't talk because I was so afraid. And then for the rest of my life, my whole family's making fun of me. Oh yeah, I remember you were afraid of Santa Claus. My mother didn't know that I thought he was going to eat me. So I'm going to end with 2 poems. This poem is grateful. This poem is really for my husband. Grateful for the drama of bread rising, for the pomegranate waiting to be opened and recklessly spill itself out into a glass bowl, and for its accomplice, the radio sitting on a high shelf above the kitchen window, crackling sweetly because it knows something I don't. For the clearness of a blue night sky, requiring nothing from us but to look up. For the great while as I remembered the word meadow with this invitation of longing. For the day I found you standing in a field of dandelions, the winged seeds floating the long distance between then and now. This last poem that ends the book really bespeaks the journey that I think relationships take us on, whether it's relationship to another person or place or an idea or even relationship to ourselves. It is a journey. And this poem is called Now That. Now that you have walked all this way just to find the ancient pathway which leads away from, or was it towards, the place where I scratched away the dark layer of a rock surface, and now that you, traveler, will take the steps 2 by 2, don't slip. It's been a journey, hasn't it? To have walked all this way through the city, into the country, on a little used chair, climbing over basalt cliffs, through and beyond the far side of a shallow wash, down into a valley overgrown with cholla and saguaro. Now that you can finally rest, the bones of both feet hurt, your mouth is dry. And now you know what has become of a mark etched on the wall, a canyon echo rising up to greet you. Hello, hello. Thank you very much for listening. I so appreciate it.
I can applaud on behalf of everyone. I just unmuted myself. That was a gorgeous reading. Thank you so much.
And if anybody has any questions.
I wonder if we could, if you'd be okay with people unmuting themselves to ask the questions rather than necessarily typing in the chat.
Sure, I'm good with
Or
that.
make comments. So if anyone wants to comment or question, just feel free to do so verbally.
Hi, Lois.
Where is he?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Where are
Oh.
you?
You'll need to.
I'm up on top.
need
I know the other people.
Oh,
I
there
don't
he
think-
is. That's my brother.
Yeah. Well, you were the sponge and I was a little bit of water that went into
Ow.
the sponge. I mean, even from the time when you were little, you know, and I knew that there was someone special sitting inside that little girl. And now that precious woman.
Well, you're my brother, but you're my first teacher. Nick was, he was a history teacher for what, 33 years?
32, yeah.
32 years. All in Long Island. Every time I go back to Long Island, when we go someplace, like we're in the supermarket or at the gas station, he says, oh, that's one of my students. That's why he's taught everybody on Long Island. And they all come up to him, even his doctor came up to him and said, Mr. Ferrone, Mr. Ferrone. He's a specialist, right?
True.
He taught everybody. He was a fabulous teacher. And I'm not just saying that.
There was a quick story. There was my wife and I used to go to a cabaret, you know, like before we got married. And there was a gentleman and his wife would sing French songs. That's some of the stuff I gave to my sister. And he came to me and said, I wrote the song Till, like Till the Rivers Flow Upstream, that song. And I didn't think too much of it. And then I was teaching, and a young man who was a French teacher, he said, my last name is Danvers. I said, well, that gentleman sang Till at a restaurant. He goes, that was my father. I said, oh my God. So it comes full circle, you know, and everybody made that song. Tom Jones made it, you know. If you want to hear an experience, put Tony Bennett sings Till. It's an amazing song. But, you know, it's part of life, you know, things come your way. And my sister picks up those little grains that we don't even know that are there, you know, like the one about my hospital room. Yeah, I did see angels.
And he
Maybe-
did tell me, write this poem. He did say that.
Yeah.
You don't remember, but he did say that. He
Yeah.
also was a really hard teacher. Okay. I always tell the story. Because he has like a degree in philosophy too. So I'm like, he's like, okay, what's the nature of good and evil? And I said, I don't know. He goes, you're not thinking. What's the nature of good and evil? I said, I'm 12. I don't know. So he made me answer that. Plus he also has like a minor in Black history. So I read I still have his books. I stole all his books.
Yeah.
My other cousin, my cousin Val is here. She knows this story too. My older, because I'm like the younger of the cousins and everything. So they were in college when I was still in school, and they would have, you know, they'd take literature courses. So I would steal their books after they were done with them. I still have Raymond's poetry book. It's his handwriting in it. So, but we were fortunate. I mean, we come from an Italian American family that valued language, because that's what we had. We had food. And we had language, and for us it was like one and the same. And I always say this too, that for us it didn't matter, because we would sit around the table, and my family were very good storytellers. I'm not a good storyteller, but they were great storytellers, and everybody would listen to you, but the rule was you could not be boring. If you were boring, then nobody would listen to you. But if you were, you know, if you were interesting, though, everybody would stop and they would listen. It was wonderful. But anyway, so
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I'll make a comment.
Oh, there you are. There's my Beth.
So I've been working with Lois since 2004 because when I met her, I found that her language inspired visual images for me. And this new series of poems, again, has that richness to it. And Martha Collins mentioned the layered quality. I just find Lois's use of language and gathering of images through language to be so inspirational. And I've been lucky enough to be able to collaborate with her because of that. And just and hearing you reading it is even richer because you have a way of conveying it with your voice and with your the kind of animated spirit. But I love her work and I love her.
Love you too. Love you too.
Anyone
I've got
else?
something. Hi,
Folks,
hi, Lois.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. It's okay.
Lois,
sweetie.
Lois, I have to leave because it's my grandson's birthday right now.
I know,
so-
honey. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, babe.
All right, love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Lois. It's Linda,
Hi, Linda.
who worships you. Okay, so anyway, I'm thinking about, because I took your classes so long ago, 21 years starting, and I'm thinking about how the poetry tells the life story. Like, it just kind of not all of it is chronological, but it almost forms like a series of stepping stones through life. And as life changes and as the people around you change, it changes the words. Like you will mark these times with like poetry. And, I was wondering if you saw that in your writing too.
Yeah, it's a good, yeah. Okay, I have a hard time writing in the first person, so that's been one of my goals for the last couple of years, is to kind of force myself. Number one. Number two, I'm an excruciatingly slow writer. I mean, excruciatingly slow. I mean, I will sit down, write 3 words, and then 8 hours later, erase them. I also, for me, I'm more of the Wordsworth poetry is emotion recollected in tranquility. So a lot of the stuff that I'm exploring now, it really is, decades old. In my second book, there was I wrote a very personal poem. I think it was my second book, and I was at a postgraduate workshop with Bruce Weigel, and he looked at the manuscript before he even saw me, and he looked at me and goes, I thought you were a lot younger, because the thing I was writing about had happened, decades before, but it was so fresh and so immediate. I just needed that buffer of space. But you've heard me say this a lot of times in class, that you're never done with poetry, you're a young poet till you're dead, basically. So, I'm trying to push forward in putting challenges. Not people think, well, what do you write about? It's not so much what I'm writing about. It's like, these are the challenges I'm putting to me. I didn't know I was writing this book until the poems came together and started talking to each other. And that's actually just happened to me recently, that I think I've started a new manuscript that I didn't even know I'm like, oh, there it is. I'm going to do that.
I
I don't know if that answers it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I tend
I'm
to
not
write
an immediate poet. I'm not one of those people where,
Mm.
oh, this happened to me yesterday, let me write about it. Like, if it happened to me yesterday, I'm going to sit in the corner and cry, or experience it, or bake
Like
or
in
something.
distance. Like I
I need
distance.
distance, yeah.
A little distance.
And I need that poetic voice to be me and not me. That's what I need.
I mean, as usual, listening to you read just made me write a whole bunch of stuff. So it's like, why am I not doing this more often? Listening to poetry, reading poetry, because in me it evokes prose. So thank you. Nice to see you.
She was in my one of my graduate classes, remember, a long, long time ago. And she wrote this short story, and it was a really great short story. And remember, it was the one playing poker?
Oh, yeah, poker
Everything-
party. I always
the
tell
poker-
that story.
Yeah. And I said, this is really great, but you have a whole book here. And lo and behold, you wrote, like, now you're on what, your third book?
Well,
third?
I'm working on it, but second I've done, published. Yeah, it was one of the great moments of my writing life, chasing you down the stairwell and saying, well, what about poker party? But what about poker party? How much longer should I string it out? And you're like, you've got more than poker party.
That sounds like her, sorry.
You know, and yeah, I mean, to let go of that idea that this is my work and I'm going to keep it capsulized, it's really powerful. Yeah.
It was a good
Thank
story. I
you.
still remember
I
it.
quote you often when I'm teaching.
I know you are. Good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Anybody else out there?
So Lois, I don't,
Yes.
I,
Hi,
hi. I don't have a question, but I do have a couple of things I'd like to say. The first
Yes.
thing, there's the glasses, I remember that. The first thing is that you set me on fire so many years ago, and you were the catalyst that propelled me to even consider writing for myself, basically. And I think I was getting tired along the way at some point and mentioned that to you. And your advice to me was, Terry, make like a turtle. And I didn't understand that. And I had to ask for clarification. And you said, put your head down and keep moving and don't look up till you've reached the line. And so I took that to heart, and I have passed that on to others. I remember it to this day, obviously. And the second thing I'd like to say is that I loved your stories in the classroom when you brought in your family member, Nick. I absolutely loved it. So all those years ago and today, I'm appreciative of you, of your work. And I don't know, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, but I'm
Thank you,
glad that
Terry. Should we tell them what a bad student you were in my class? You and your friend making jokes and
oh yeah. Oh, we loved you. I still do today.
And then Terry went on, got a master's degree. And we said we would be sitting in the audience with t-shirts that say, I still
told you
have that
so.
t-shirt.
Yes, say sleep is optional, but failure is not.
I think our t-shirt said, we told you so.
Oh, yours did. Yes, maybe mine was. Yes,
Yours was,
mine
we
was.
were,
Yes.
when they handed her the diploma, we all let, we told you so. It was a great
Yes,
moment.
yes, exactly right. Well, thank you, Lois, very much.
Good to see you, honey. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Any other comments?
any other comments, questions?
I'm going to put in chat again the link to the Kelsay Books page, website that has Like Water in the Palm of My Hand. And also that is the web page, or kelsaybooks.com will be where the YouTube link will be for today's reading, in case anybody wants to go back or forward it to a friend or someone else, And if there are no other comments, Olivia, anything technical we need to know?
I think if we're good to wrap it up, I'll stop the recording. Thank you all
Okay.
so much for coming.
Thank you all. I really appreciate